There we go. So here we are. Our second seminar, well, my second seminar, we did one with Rory Court from UCLA. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by a very special guest, British and Irish Lions captain, Wales ex-captain, sorry, you're not still going, are you, like me? Wales international captain. And I put it down as you're a part-time player at Cardiff because I never saw you play. Sam Warburton, OBE. He asked me to say OBE as well. Very important.
Thanks for getting that in.
No worries. How are you, Sam? You well?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you doing, Roy?
I'm very good, thanks. I'm very good. We're here to talk about you. We're here to talk about everything SW7, everything FirstPoint USA. But I've got to start off with the biggest news on everybody's lips. Lewis Rees-Zammit to the NFL. Did you see it coming?
No, didn't see that coming. And do you know what? We're actually looking at doing something with Lewis with SW7 Academy. So we're like, is Lewis still okay to do? And they're like, yeah, no, he's still cool, you know. So to be fair, I think it's really for those who might not know, Lewis Rees-Zammit, arguably the highest profile player, one of the highest profile players in Britain right now. Wales' golden boy, and he's decided to at 23 to sack it all in for now, rugby union, to have a go at the NFL. So I think I love his ambition. It's gutsy because it's going to be way harder than he knows how hard it's going to be, but it's going to be a very hard thing to do. You know, Christian Wade tried it before, who was in the English Premiership. He was the top try scorer in the English Prem, and he only made it sort of a training squad kind of level. So it's very difficult, but I love the ambition. I think it's better to do it now when you're young than do it maybe when you're 28, 29, because if you give it a stab at 28, 29, it doesn't work. You know, probably it's going to be difficult to come back into rugby. He'd give it a couple of years now. He could always come back in his mid-20s and still have a fruitful career in union. So, yeah, it's gutsy. He's never been shy to do things differently, so I do admire that.
He's definitely got the speed for it. You look at the athletes out there, and it's quite fitting because we're going to talk about, obviously, the pathway in the USA, etc. But there are some serious athletes out there. How do you reckon he'll go, like realistically? Because he goes into the IPP, the International Player Pathway system first, and they've got to try and work his way out. But how do you reckon he'll go?
From a physical standpoint, he'll be fine. Like, you know, you've seen him play. I'm sure some of the people who've just tuned in have seen him play. If you haven't, you know, one of the quickest boys out there. And like, there's speed and then there's proper speed. So he's got that proper speed. He's skillful. Probably he won't need to kick, but from a handling ability, his catching ability should be fine. The difference is are you still able to catch when you've got 18 stoners with helmets running at you with no one blocking them? That's the difference, you know. So
they don't need to use their arms or anything. It's a whole different ballgame. Really.
So being a wide receiver, you're going to be exposed, and you have to admit, or you have to accept rather, you're going to take some massive bangs in helmets. And also, somebody was chatting, it was very different. We play rugby, we have all our peripheral vision available to us, but when you suddenly put a helmet on, that just completely, you know, it suddenly becomes quite a different skill then, you know, having to run, and you know, sort of hand-eye coordination with a head guard is much more difficult. So he's got to pick up all that, but he's got given himself time. Athletically, he's in his prime, so now is his best chance if ever.
Yeah, good luck to him. Good luck to him. We'll start then. Firstly, talk to us about the SW7 Academy and FirstPoint USA. How did that all come about? The partnership.
So yeah, I work on the television with a fellow Scotsman and teammate of yourself for the national team, John Barkley, and he was asking me about SW7 Academy, and I told him what it was. Then he told me about FirstPoint, and we were both like, "Oh, there might be some way we can kind of help each other here, you know." So obviously, FirstPoint USA helps assist aspiring athletes going over to the US and to help them study and further their careers from a sporting and academic level. But then we can assist FirstPoint with strength and conditioning. So we basically provide professional level strength and conditioning programs online from our app for any sport. So we got FirstPoint athletes from golf, football, rugby. It could be lacrosse, swimming, you name it. You know, we can tailor a program for them. So that's how we work together with FirstPoint. So it's great for us because we managed to work with that's kind of where we started off, that age demographic of 16 to 24, people who want top level training, which is normally only accessible to kind of professional athletes. We want to make that accessible to all, really. And FirstPoint can provide the athletes who are ambitious enough and who are diligent enough to want to do the training. So it works really nicely. So yeah, FirstPoint, I think, have a fantastic product offering, and they give the students the best provision that they possibly can to give them the best chance to make it when they go over to the USA. So it's a really nice collaboration. That's probably born about 6 months ago. Maybe we're 6 months in now. So since we very first had conversations started, so all's going well with us.
Yeah, well, we came down, didn't we, and did a little bit down in Cardiff, actually. You tried to get me to do some weights, which I never liked doing when I was a rugby player, and I've got shoulders like a salmon already, so no point trying to change it now, mate. No point trying to change it. Listen, Worbs, we'll go in a roundabout way. We'll come all the way back round to the app at some point. I just want to start off for those in here and take you right back to the beginning of your rugby career. And what age did you think you could actually make it as a professional rugby player or a professional sportsman for the case of everyone in here?
Yeah, so this is what I want people to probably get from this conversation. And, you might chip in on this as well. But to get to top level, and you kind of only see it when you get to top level, but you kind of see what behaviors and mentality people display to get to the very top. And it's like we realize now we finish sport, these traits are the same, whether it's the way you treat your studies, the way you treat your sport, the way you treat your career, whether you go into business when you finish playing, the traits are the same. But I think, when you see players who they get their first cap for their national team and they do their interview, and I know some of them are probably trying to sound humble, but maybe I was very ambitious, and usually ambitious from a young age. I remember when I got my first cap, and I wouldn't have said this publicly because I wouldn't want something arrogant, but when people are like, oh, how does it feel to get your first cap? People are like, oh, I never thought this would happen. It's brilliant. I remember thinking in my head, well, yeah, no, this is what I expect to happen. Because from the age of 14, I probably committed myself unusually compared to my mates. Like, none of my mates were doing what I was doing when I was 14 with regard to training, diet, the mentality I had and the desperation I had to become professional and do whatever it took to become professional. So I was like, I want to be one of the best players that I've played, and I want to play for the British and Irish Lions. So I got to not just be better than this kid who's in my school or who plays in Cardiff, where I'm from, or in Wales for that matter, at my age group. I got to be the best in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England, and over a 15-year age range if I got to play for the Lions. So that I got to do what I never used to get that nervous about playing against an opposite number. Playing the game, always nervous because I cared. But my opposite number I was playing against, I was like, but if I'm going to play number 7, which is my position for the Lions, this guy can't get in my way. Like, he hasn't got he doesn't eat as healthy as I do. He doesn't train like I do. He doesn't have my genetic ability. I was quite lucky. I was very tall and quick and fast and powerful. But more importantly, he doesn't do the training or the nutrition or the recovery that I do. He hasn't got the willpower or the want that I've got, the resilience. He just can't be as good as me. And I'd say this was probably from the age of like 14, 15. So when I went to the academy systems and the professional system, I found it quite easy being a pro. I enjoyed myself. I'd still socialise with my friends and do the normal things that teenagers do. But when it was time to be on, it was time to be on. And I did what had to be done regarding my training and nutrition and things like that. So I'd say from 14, 15, I sort of set my sights very high. And I bet with my mates I was going to make it. So I played for the Lions, lads. I used to bet them money, and I had to cough up that money when I did it. But I was like, Conor McGregor, who a lot of the people might have heard of, MMA fighter, he said I wasn't talented, I was obsessed, and I could resonate with that a little bit. I did have some sort of mild obsession about making it. So from a fairly young age, I was quite adamant about that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about ability and then mindset. And I listened to, I think it was Diary of a CEO the other day with the Thierry Henry episode. And when he was born, his dad lifted up and said, "You will be one of the greatest football players on earth." And it was almost drummed into him. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is it's not all about ability, is it? Because some people might not have the ability quite there. But if you can put your mind to it and, like you said, go at it with a mindset of, I'm going to do everything I can possible within my reach, you can make it. And effectively, that's what happened to Thierry Henry. And his dad obviously forced it into him. But once you get that mindset right, you can take it places.
That's the difference between somebody who's nearly and somebody who doesn't. So, like, we've met him. I bet you've spoken to so many players along your professional journey. or parents, and they go, oh yeah, my son would have made it, but he got injured and he didn't make it. And this is why I say the number one trait is resilience, no matter what you do. Because I'm like, well, I had 2 ops before I was 19. So I don't say this to them. I'm like, I still got there because I just refused to give up. And nothing in life is easy, is it? Like, people think that as professionals just go through the academy system on this nice upward trajectory where there's no bumps. There's bumps everywhere. Like, there's going to be someone who doesn't believe in you. There's going to be some coaches that don't back you. There's going to be probably an injury along the way. There's going to be something that happens. Could be exams get in the way, and something might stunt your progress. But if you just, the most resilient people get to the top because they just keep going. So when you get to professional level, 90% of the dead wood is gone because they're not mentally tough enough. They've given up. Somebody didn't believe in them, or they had an injury, thought they couldn't come back. But actually, no, the ruthless competitors just keep going. They just keep trudging. They keep going, and they get there in the end. So that's why I think that mentality, to have that resilience and belief in yourself. I was a good player growing up. I was one of the better players in Cardiff. Was I the best? No, I wasn't the best. There was players who had much more. Some players who were physically much more gifted than me. Certainly from a skill set, more gifted. And I say so many times, I had young people who I played with. I'm like, if he had my mentality, he would have played for Wales at 18. But a lot of people don't have that, and it's an interesting question. Is mentality a privilege, or is it something that you can train yourself? It's quite an interesting debate, that one. But I think it's something you can certainly work on. And if you realise that, and as teenagers, it's not what you want to hear, but you've got to play the long game if you want to make it. Nobody makes it in 12 weeks or in 6 months. If you're 15 listening to this now, you're going to be on a journey. Like I say, you enjoy yourself, you do things that normal teenagers do, but you're going to be on a journey for about 5-6 years. But I tell you now, after 6 years, when you're 21, you're a young adult, a very young man, and you've made it to an international level or professional level in your discipline. You'll look back, and your mates are, which you're supportive of your mates, but they're still hanging around doing things, and you've made it. Then you think the sacrifice is worth it. But sometimes when you're young, it feels like you're missing out on stuff. I can promise you, if you play the long game, it's worth it. So yeah, but not many people have that mentality at the young age. I just think what separates some of the people who make it compared to some who don't.
Not a lot of people believe me when I say this, Warbs, but at the age of, I think it was about 16, 17, when everyone was enjoying a good drink, like started drinking and all that sort of stuff. I trained with a lady called Margot Wells. I'm sure you will have come across. She trained her husband, Alan Wells, to win the Olympics, the 100-meter Olympics. And she was a sprint coach, and there was players like James Haskell, Danny Cipriani, Lawrence Delalio was seeing her. And I went to see her, and I remember I came in one day, 17, hungover. I know, shouldn't have been drinking, but
We'll do it.
And I turned up hungover, and she said, well, go away. No, don't come back. And I said, well, no, I'll be all right. And she said, no, don't bother. Like, if you're not serious, don't bother. And she sent me away. And I tried to contact her a few times for the rest of the week, and she just ignored me. And I thought, what is going on? So I actually got in the car, drove to where she did it in Guildford in Surrey. And I said, listen, what? And she said, well, if you're not serious about it and you're going to drink, then don't bother. So to what I'm probably was like when I played, but right at the beginning, there took a little bit of that willpower to go, actually, okay. And she stopped me drinking anything like that for about 1.5 years. And that's where I really made those gains. So it resonates with me, I suppose, with a lot of people in this webinar now. There'll be rugby players, but there'll be other athletes. I truly believe that rugby is a sport, one of the many sports that you can get away with actually not having a huge amount of talent, but just working really, really hard and doing the basics really well and repetition of what you do. For me, that I think can, players and young people in here can look at that and go, yeah, that's amazing. And then you go on to the pathway in America and the facilities and what they can get access to over there. And what were probably the biggest sacrifices you made at that young age that some of the people in this webinar right now will be thinking, maybe I should make that sacrifice? What were some of the toughest ones you had to make?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was like my first year when I was 15, when I broke it into the Cardiff Academy at rugby, and I had a family holiday for a week planned. And because it was my first pre-season and I wanted to make a real impression, I didn't go. And I stayed and I did the training. And that's like a small sacrifice. Then there would be times where, like going out, for example, like socially, especially when you're late teens and you're sort of in an academy system, like I think it's really good to enjoy yourself and switch off from what you're doing. So finding the right time in the year to have a couple of drinks with friends in the right environment is good. Like, you need to break away from sport, because if you try and live your sport all day, every day, all year, it'll burn you out. So you need to relax and switch off. But I really had to limit that because I didn't want to get caught. I didn't want to get a bad reputation for the sort of guy who goes out, gets distracted. I want people to know that I was like the uber professional, super pro who was desperate to make it, wanted to set a good example. So, I did have a reasonable social life, but, I did turn down a lot of sixth form parties and things. So I was like, well, that's not going to be good for me. Like, I know it's not good for my recovery. It's not good for my physical development. And there's obviously a load of research around the detrimental effects of alcohol. That's obvious on performance. If it's a Christmas social and you got 2 weeks off from a game, fine, timing's okay. But then for most of the year when people are drinking, I'm like, I used to think, well, I'm not going to do that. And every time, and even if it was only a small, tiny physical gain, the mental gain I got from that was enormous. Because when I take the field and I play, I'd be like, there's no way in hell these people are as prepared as me. And I almost had this like mental bulletproof vest on that I was like, I'm impenetrable. Like I'm athletically so much better than these people. And I'm so more physically well prepared than them because I just knew I was willing to do what it was. And probably the psychological edge that gave me more than anything, over other players. So missing out on some of those social gatherings, that was a big one. But I do urge people, you still need some of that. You need your friends. I remember having some advice, actually. Someone said, I was 18. He went, you've got to ditch your friends. You've got to be perfect pro. And I remember thinking, that is completely wrong. You need your friends and you need that support network around you. Because like I said, there are going to be tough times when you get injured. You might feel a bit lonely, maybe some rejection from a selection perspective. You need your friends and your support group. So keep them close. Like, don't forget that. Never get too big for all that. You need those people because you realize when you get through some tough times in your sport or in your academic career, you need those people around you. So never neglect that. I want to make that clear. But you need to appreciate that if you want to get to a place where most people don't get to, you've got to be willing to do things that most people aren't willing to do. And if you're happy to do that, then you'll probably do pretty well.
I bet there's a few blokes that your age sat there now going, look where he is. And I remember taking the piss out of him because he wouldn't come for a beer that night, and they're going, oh, maybe I should have done that. Forbes, you talk a lot about mindset and the psychological side of things. When you became a professional, did you do a lot of work on that sort of stuff?
Not on purpose. A lot of the sort of mindset I'm talking about, I kind of just had a bit naturally anyway. But then when I was 22, we had a sports psychologist who was working with Wales, and I stumbled across him because they work under the radar, sports psychs. They don't go, look, I'm a sports psychologist, come and work with me. They just, what it's like. They just grab you for a cuppa and you just start talking and things escalate. And you start working with each other privately. Well, under the sort of, for me, this was the Welsh Rugby Union. So with Wales, it was under the Wales banner and during training times, but you do it in private, like in the evenings, in between training. And I used to have like a bit of an issue. I found it going to the men's game quite hard because it's a huge step playing international compared to just age grade rugby. And we did a lot of like confidence work. Even though I was very confident in myself, I still needed that boost when maybe I was like a 21-year-old when you're playing these people. I was always physically pretty gifted for my age group. Then you play national and I was like, whoa, I'm not, everyone's like me now, if not a bit better. So it's like, I used to work with a sports psychologist a lot then. And a lot of it was about not necessarily some of it was performance related. So you do like all the imagery and the things that you hear about, which I found really helped. But a lot of it was actually like how to deal with the lifestyle change, because suddenly like, when you become fairly well recognised, particularly in Wales, where rugby is a very big sport, like managing your life outside of sport, and like I've talked about switching off, deliberately making time to switch off from the sport, and like learning to say no to people, because you actually need to stay quite selfish and make sure you can prepare, because you know what it's like, you can get dragged from pillar to post being asked to do things. And it was actually like how to manage my time, because being a pro, and I work with a coach who said this, is very true. It's quite easy to do weights 3 times a week. It's quite easy to do fitness twice a week for a couple of hours and do some skills sessions. That's 7, 8, 9 hours of a week as a professional. But actually the best professionals, so say you train for 2 hours a day, the best professionals are actually what you actually do the 22 hours outside of training, when it comes to making sure that you're recovering, that you're eating, that you're sleeping, that you're doing any physical preparation work, analysis work that you need to do. Actually, the best pros are what you do outside of those 2 hours a day. It's the 22 hours that separate the elite from the sub-elite that I find, the ones that are willing to make rugby almost a lifestyle, or the sport you're playing a lifestyle. And like I mentioned, doing the things that other people aren't willing to do. There are players who've got to the top by being poor pros. They might be unusually talented, but I can tell you now, then they don't have the same longevity in the sport that somebody who's a diligent pro does. You know, I'm sure that you can vouch for that. If you want a prosperous career, which is going to span a decade, you can't just put in work for a year and rest on your laurels. You constantly put in the work in, you know. And when you're in school, hard work isn't cool. When you go to a professional environment, you get respect from hard work. If somebody turned up to Scotland or Glasgow environment when you were playing and they were lazy, they get called out and they don't last very long. But people who come in, they set new standards. They're good pros. They train hard. Good blokes, but they train hard. They're the ones who win the respect of their teammates, you know. And that shifts from when you go to school to professional level. Hard work's actually pretty cool when you get to pro level, and that's what earns you respect.
There's only one bloke that's the anomaly there, and that's Finn Russell. I've seen him.
Yes, and he's pretty talented, and it's annoying. Yeah, but he's really talented. You don't get away with it.
But one thing that's really interesting is Finn. He puts this persona out there that he's, you know, so laid back, so relaxed. He's probably the most diligent behind the scenes in terms of what he does in terms of prep. That probably makes up for a lot of it. If he did a bit of a gym, I actually was chatting to him the other day. He said, "No, I've upped my weights regime at Bath. I do a session a week now."
Yeah, this is small steps, but then, like you say, but his technical ability and the time he would put into a computer to analyze opposition would probably be second to none.
But did you see him at the weekend against Racing? Absolutely ending blokes. Wacky, he put him on his ass. It was unbelievable. I've never seen
his defense has gone up a level. I've noticed that at Bath.
I think it's the one weight session that they've been making him. It's pretty interesting. So let's go back to the app then. And obviously, if you become a client of FirstPoint USA, you then have access to the SW7 app, and you talk there a little bit about nutrition, recovery. You can get that sort of stuff in there as well. Am I right?
Yeah. So FirstPoint clients all get a program tailored towards their sport, and in that, then we can supplement it with like recovery, like mobility, yoga videos, nutrition recipes, fitness sessions, like you name it, like whatever you need to excel in your sport from a physical development standpoint, we provide it. It's all delivered on the phone, and we can actually see. So if you're from FirstPoint and you're listening to this, we can see if you've done how often you've trained that week. And if you open the app and then you skip through your sessions and you finish, it'll tell me that you've done it for 7 minutes, so I know you haven't done it.
That's why I don't have the app. I just stay away from it.
Joe, we've actually brought another coach in now to actually monitor that more closely. So if anyone needs a nudge, you can go, you know, hey Ryan, notice you only trained once this week. Everything okay? So because we know and I've talked about doing the boring things for a long time, you know, like the long journey that you're going to be on. From a physical development standpoint, because obviously that's going to be our bias because that's what SW7 do. But if you train twice a week in the gym, or you train 3 times a week in the gym, that doesn't sound like a big difference. But over the course of a year, that's 50 sessions. Like the physical development you'll gain for doing an extra 50 sessions compared to someone who's just done 2. And never mind 1 year, if you do it for 3 years, now you're starting to see the gulf in why you see a freaky 20-year-old who's rocking up playing professional rugby. Yet sometimes there's some genetic ability in there, but actually when you see a really athletically gifted 20-year-old, he's probably done all the things that a regular 16, 17-year-old haven't been willing to do for 3 years. That's why I was in decent shape. I got a twin brother who's 3 stone lighter than me, which kind of shows how manufactured some of my weight was. But I was like, no, I've just trained way longer and way more diligently than anyone my age was willing to do. I was happy to do it because I knew it would get me to the top, you know. By the way, I'm focused on strength and conditioning. The same applies for your skill development, you know, all aspects. You need to be well-rounded in your discipline. But yeah, that's kind of the difference between training twice a week and 3 times a week. Do the work. It's not always about training when you feel like training. Sometimes you just got to put the work in when you don't feel like it. And they're those championship hours that no one sees, that no one knows you're doing it, but you just know you're building that bank slowly. And I remember when I played for the Lions, the sports psychologist that I just mentioned, he said, Sam, it's not the 1 month that has got you here to the Lions. It's not how well you've prepared out here in New Zealand for a month or Australia, whichever tour it was in. So this has been since you were 14. Like every session you've done since you were 14, weights, fitness, skill session, everything that you've put in your body has built you to this point now. And then you look back and you go, crikey, this is 15 years of work has gone into this athlete here, you know, and then the kind of confidence you kind of gain from that can be massive once you've got that bank of work in. So yeah, the longer you do it, the more you do it, the bigger the confidence will grow within you. I can guarantee that.
I know that the CEO of FirstPoint USA, Andy Keane, is in here watching. So if you can just give me the login for the app, so I can check what his gym regime's been like. I just want to.
We'll put it on our socials for everyone to see.
Yeah. That's it. Let the world know. Let the world know. And listen, we played in probably one of the most attritional positions on the field, and I reckon one of the positions you've got to be the fittest, other than nines. I reckon back row.
Yeah.
We all hate fitness. Well, I certainly did, but there's a little bit in terms of fitness in there as well, some fitness stuff.
Yeah, so like it depends. Say somebody wants, if you're a sports player, we have we got like a whole PDF made up, which actually was a request which has come through. So people will start seeing these getting drip fed into their routines. But yeah, there'll be fitness sessions, and fitness, you know what it's like. It's say you're it doesn't have to be rugby for listening. Say you're soccer, football, lacrosse, rugby, like field sports. Is a very different type of training that you have to do. We kind of like training, which is called like FESE training, which people will start seeing now, which is basically a mixture of basically full energy system exposure, meaning you've got to be good at 1 minute bouts, you've got to be really good at 10-second bouts. So you've got to have that full spectrum. You don't just want to do a 3 or 5 kilometer run, because one, that's not actually very specific to your sport. If you're talking team sports, it's very multi-directional: acceleration, deceleration, high speed, low speed, rest periods. So that's where you have to replicate your training to do that. Look, doing 3 and 5Ks is good to get your baseline up, to get a foundation in place, but then you've got to start doing more sport-specific stuff. And when you start doing your sport-specific stuff, which we've done pre-season, year in, year out, that's then when you really elevate your fitness levels, because you're doing what pros are doing and what will give you much quicker gains, much better gains, much quicker. So yeah, we provide that for athletes should they need it as well.
Just have a little look here, because I'm aware that there's a few questions in here from Noah Thornton there. How many hours did you train when you were about 15, 16 years old?
Yeah, I actually had to be told to pull back on training. So when I was 15, I remember there was a Christmas holiday. I trained 20 days out of 21. We had 3 weeks off, trained for 20 days. It was only Christmas Day that the gym didn't open. And I remember going into the academy telling them this, thinking, oh yeah, they're going to love this. And they were like, love the work ethic, but stop, because you're not allowing any time for adaptation. So when you're young, you kind of think, oh, more. But actually, when you become a professional, you get professionally educated on training. The rest and adaptation part is so important, is as important as the training. So when I realized what I was doing, 3 weight sessions a week is plenty, maybe 4 if you're not competing on a weekend. Say you're competing on a weekend, you don't want to do more than 2 or 3 because you want to be able to perform on the weekend. But maybe 3 to 4 weight sessions, depending on whether I had fixtures or not. It would be 2 or 3 team sessions, so that would be a mixture for the school and with the academy and the age group system I was with, and maybe 1 fitness top up. So you're looking at, it was busy. I remember like training school lunch times, training after school, but like I kind of knew it was not normal. But and football fans will know, obviously, Gareth Bale. We were both in the same class in school. We went through school together. So I was seeing him going down to Southampton after school every day and training at lunch times. And I was doing the same thing and training after school. So we were like, yeah, this is just what I was like, oh, this is normal. This is obviously what's got to be done. So I guess I was probably both lucky that we had each other just to bounce off and be like, yeah, not many other teenagers are doing this, but yeah, we're doing it. And we're both ending up pretty good because no one else is doing it and we're doing it. So you just get that bug and you keep going. But yes, I would be careful. Less is more. That's why we're here to guide you from a strength and conditioning standpoint. But there was a point where I was playing football and rugby and all these sports. I got to 15. I was like, oh, I got to focus on one. Otherwise, you're too busy. You're on your feet too much. It's going to be detrimental to your physical development. And even though I had to sacrifice playing football with my mates, which I absolutely loved, playing at club level, I threw all my eggs in the rugby basket and made sure I prepared properly for rugby. So yeah, a couple of sessions a week from a skill set team training standpoint, 3 weights, maybe 1 fitness or speed. That'll be ample. With your game exposure on the weekend, that's plenty of exposure from a physical standpoint.
We've got another question here from Zoe, but I think you might have, in that, pretty much answered it. I guess it would the question I would ask at the end. I will. My daughter currently goes to rugby college and undertakes gym work and rugby training 4 times a week with them, along with training with her home club on a Thursday night and playing on a Sunday. How much would you expect to see her on your app? She has plans at college to follow with regards to S&C. What would you expect from her? So how can you work the app alongside what you do at school, and is there a way to tailor it?
Yeah, so we don't have like a set schedule, like Monday do this, Wednesday do this, because we know people are very different with their timetable. So we don't want to stress people out. So if you're like, look, if you can get 2 weight sessions in a week, say rugby's a bit different. We'd recommend 3 because obviously it's such a physically demanding sport. If you're playing football, like soccer, football, or hockey, then obviously the physical demands aren't quite the same as rugby. Like a lot of the training is to put on weight, where if you're playing those sports, the gym work can really benefit your level of resilience in injury prevention. 2, for example, your speed alone, because a lot of speed is actually developed in the gym. If you're more powerful as an athlete, the transfer into your acceleration, your speed there's a very high correlation between that, being strong and powerful from the gym to your speed work. So it'll help your acceleration from a physical standpoint. But yeah, that sounds like there's a lot of work going on there. And I would recommend, look, if you're serious about your sport and making it, you do have to make some fairly uncomfortable decisions. Think, well, I need to focus on this team. If one team's a recreational team and another team is where you're going to be spotted and that's where you're going to really advance yourself, there is a point you're going to have to prioritize one. And it's not nice. Like, I remember turning away from, like I said, from playing football. I had to turn down from, there was like my local club in rugby, and I focused playing for my school because that was a much better pathway for me. I had to say, so I can't play for the club anymore, or I can't play football anymore. I was just playing for the rugby team, and I worked my training around that. So if you're doing something every day, training, whether it's in the gym or from a team perspective, you are allowing 0 time for recovery and adaptation. And that is actually when you get better. So when you recover, the training is just a stimulus to force adaptation. If you don't recover, you're not going to reap the rewards of that adaptation, particularly in the gym and from a fitness. You're just going to keep digging yourself into a deeper hole of recovery, which you're not going to come out of. So yeah, making sure that you have allowed time to recover is going to be very important. And listening to that daughter's schedule, there might be some decisions to be made about maybe pulling back on some things, which will enable her to excel then when she does turn up to training.
Talk to us just quickly about recovery and how important that is in terms of sleep. And I was never a fan of it, but what's crazy is since I've stopped, I'm actually doing more of like cold water therapy than I ever done. I don't know why. I think it's maybe because it's out there, everyone's doing it at the moment, and the sauna stuff. But sleep's a huge one, isn't it?
Yeah, the best thing that people can do for recovery, and luckily for most of us, they're all easily accessible. And if you're not getting these 3 pillars in place, then like ice therapy can be very beneficial. The evidence is still, from a research perspective, is still, it's not 100% conclusive because people feel better. It's almost like the placebo effect. If you think it, if you feel great from it, like I love a jacuzzi, I feel great coming out of jacuzzi. Well, if you feel great, we'll do it, So there is some placebo to it as well. But the things which are guaranteed for recovery, and 2 of these are free. Number 1 is sleep. So ideally, minimum 7 hours sleep. Sleep is a superpower. If you must prioritize sleep. So if you can sleep, that's the number 1 method for recovery. Number 2 is hydration, making sure that you're staying reasonably well hydrated throughout the day. Those 2 are easy for us all. And 3 is just good quality nutrition. Now, when I say nutrition, I'm not talking about supplementation. Supplementation should really come when you're hitting that, kind of getting close to that ceiling from a physical perspective. Most people aren't going to get there until their late teens, 20. So I wouldn't stress about supplements at a teenager level. Make sure you get good quality food in. So that's just like, obviously not eating McDonald's and Domino's. Don't get me wrong, it's lovely to treat yourself to one of them in a while. I'm going to finish this call, I'm going to have a curry. So I treat myself to 1 takeaway a week, okay? So I'm not making out I live like a monk, but getting your fruits and vegetables in, getting your meats and fishes in for protein and your eggs, and getting your carbohydrates in the form of rice and potatoes and pasta. Like, if something's naturally occurring, you could find it growing out the ground or coming off a tree, or it comes from an animal, it's probably going to be pretty good for you. That's kind of how the simplest way I can explain food. So when you look at food, if you're looking at Cocoa Pops, a box of Cocoa Pops, how processed is that compared to a potato? Like, it's a lot more processed. The potato's obviously going to have natural goodness for you. So focus on your food, focus on your sleep, focus on your hydration. If you get those 3 things in place, then when you add ice therapy, which I like cold therapy as well, when you add in then those things in, it takes your recovery to a whole new level. But get those 3 rocks in place first, otherwise you're going to be weeing into the wind.
part of this as well, I suppose, is you look at this, it's all a personal development thing. And a way that I've found is a great way to access it is podcasts. Like some of the stuff you listen to, all this stuff's out there, isn't it? You can go out, and you mentioned sleep. At most of the athletes between 15 and 20 years old, Xbox, PlayStation, probably the biggest killer of sleep, the one that you get addicted to, you lose all your sleep by playing that. So try and get off that more and do a lot of podcasting, because the stuff out there, the knowledge out there, is so easily accessible. And you mentioned your 3 pillars there in terms of water-free, recovery, etc. Give us 3 pieces of advice that you give to an aspiring athlete who's looking to make it to the next career in their, next level in their career for FirstPoint USA.
Great question. And by the way, just on our point, as we move off from this recovery and training aspect, I just put 3 names in the conversation. They are the 3. There's many out there who are very good. If you want to look at social media accounts who just give out brilliant information, and they got no agenda, it's backed by, when you're looking at like research, like some of the research that these influencers claim, they're done on mice or they're done on like 10 humans who've never trained. So it's not that realistic. These people only use evidence from what they call human randomized control trials, which means, or they're like a meta-analysis, which means you put all the best credible research together and you come out with a conclusion. So those people are absolute no bull, straight facts. What is the truth? Whenever I see someone saying something quite controversial, I go to these guys and they actually tell you what is the evidence behind it. So if anybody wants to look at social media, you can scroll through these accounts for hours and it'll only benefit you. Lane Norton is kind of more, he covers everything. Alan Aragon is a nutrition expert, and Brad Schoenfeld is the lead in sort of muscle building for those who play maybe contact sports, and sort of strength training expert. So yeah, to save those if you're a young athlete, and follow them on Instagram. They're the best accounts out there. But yeah, on your point of 3 tips I would give, number 1 is like, there's 3 things I would say: resilience, patience, and doing the work. And I'll explain them. Number 1, I'd say, would be just putting the work in. And I found this with my exams in school, whether it was academically or whether it was with my training. And this is just a life lesson for everyone. What you put in life is what you'll get out. If you're lazy, you won't get much back. If you put in effort and you put in work, over the long term, I promise you'll get it back. So do the work. What you put in life is what you get out. So make sure you do that. Number 2 would be patience. Like becoming a good athlete isn't a 6-month journey. I'm sorry to say, it's not really a 12-month journey either. It takes, it's a year, a few years it's going to take you to really start getting to your ceiling if you're in your teens. Be patient and play the long game, because I'm sure you're the same. I hate these get fit, get a 6-pack in 6 to 12 weeks, or get rich in 12 weeks, or earn 10 grand a month by doing this. Right? Don't get conned into that. Anyone who's got anything about them will tell you they've got to the top of their field because they've done the mundane, boring things that need to be done consistently for a long time, and that's why they've leapfrogged all their competition. So do the work, be patient, and I've touched upon it at the start of this, was resilience. The people who just don't give up get to the top. I guarantee you there's no one you've seen who's just, like I said, been on an upward trajectory. There's been some rejection, there's been some injury, there's been a coach who might not have believed in them. But as long as you just stick to it and just keep going, the most resilient people in life get to the top in whatever they do. And I love the quote from, you hear like people like Steve Jobs, who founded Apple, who's now passed away, but like, it took him thousands of computers until he got the final computer. It's to say, like, people think you try something once, it doesn't work, I give up. So we'll try again. If that didn't work, well, you try again. It's just like, and he's had a great quote. He said, only those crazy enough to change the world only those crazy enough to think they can change the world actually will. Basically, you've got to aim high. If you don't aim high, you're not going to get there. So you've got to aim high, set your sights high, because if you don't, then somebody else will. You've got to be that person who just wants to set the bar to a level where other people don't want to set it. And if you're not going to do it, who will? Someone's got to do it. So be that person. So do the work, be patient, and resilience. If you've got those 3 things, I reckon you've got a fantastic chance of getting to the top.
No, that's awesome. We've got a few more bits to go. There's loads of really good questions coming in, and I'm sorry that we won't be able to get through all of them. One of our top swimming clients, actually, Stella McCarty, has asked, how do you manage pre-game anxiety? And I suppose before you start on this, I mean, 222 professional games for Glasgow Warriors, and up until the 222nd, still felt exactly the same nerves. It's just in you. And I think if you're not nervous and there's not that part of you. For me, this is how I felt anyway, and everyone's different. It felt to me like maybe that's my way of knowing that it meant something, that I cared about it, and I still had those pre-game nerves until that ball get kicked off. And as soon as it was kicked, they would just disappear and off I went. How would you deal with that sort of stuff?
I 100% agree with every single thing you just said. When the whistle went and you kicked off, it was weird. It was like, right, I'm in. I'm playing. But
you go, what was I worried about?
Yeah, why am I nervous? Yeah, during a game, I've never worried in a game. But pre-match, I hated match day, pre-match. I hated it. I used to be sitting down eating a meal 3 hours for a game, which is a pre-match meal. And there was times I'd be thinking, God, if I'm playing 30 games a year, I've got another 6 years left. Like, oh, God, I've got 180 more pre-match meals I've got to try and get down here. Just pushing food on a plate. I'm like, what am I putting myself through this for? And Steve Redgrave was the same. He won. I heard something he said. So what you're saying, like now you speak to pros, you know that you all feel like this. Steve Redgrave, I saw it into, he did before he won 5 Olympic golds rowing. And he used to say to himself, why do I put myself through this? Because but then when you get through the other end, it's worth it. So that's what I say. Like a lot of rugby, I didn't enjoy, but I said I don't enjoy 80% of it. You know, the cold, wet training, the travel away from home, the anxiety before games. But the 20% that you enjoy outweighs the 80% tenfold. That's why you do it. But I was sat down next to a young player, and I was playing for Cardiff once. He looked at me and he was like, I was getting towards the end of my career, experienced player, and he looked at me. He was playing 6, I was playing 7. He went, I could tell he was quite worried to ask me this because I bit his head off. He went, Sam, do you still get nervous like when you play? And I went, mate, absolutely. I get nervous every game, like you said, because I care. So the one thing I'd say is you can do like breathing techniques, you know, you can do positive self-talk, and they're things that I absolutely did. There's nothing you can do to click a fingers that'll make that go away. It's normal human behavior. You have to embrace it. And the only thing which hopefully might reassure you is even when I went into a Lions dressing room, which is when Britain is basically the British team. So you've got the best players in Britain. You go into that dressing room and you see people with their head in their hands, tapping their ankles on the floor. I'm like, this nerves and anxiety is normal. You know, it's normal. On TV, they make it look very alpha and hero shots, but everyone feels that. And the only thing I can say is it's absolutely normal. Almost everyone goes through it. If they don't go through it, then it's probably because they don't care enough about what they're doing. But yeah, don't worry about anxiety. Perfectly normal human behavior. And I say this, the fight or flight mechanism. This is what, when people say, like, you know, big game player, it's a bit of a cliche. Oh, he's a big game player. I'll tell you what a big game player is. When you're feeling those nerves and anxiety in the dressing room and you're getting backed into a corner, pressure's on, you know, you're playing on live TV. Sometimes it's, you know, you would have done the same. You would have played in games with millions of people watching. Scotland, England would have 10 million people watching. You got 70,000 playing live, watching you, 70,000 watching you live. You got all this going on. But the big players, and you were this player, you were very competitive, which is why you make it international level. The ones who don't make it, they back into a corner. There's that fight or flight. They're flight. They're like, oh no, they don't handle it. But your big game players think, nah, sod that. They come out and they fight. Even though they're feeling those nerves and anxiety, they come out and they just throw the kitchen sink at the opposition. They just do it. They make themselves do it. That's your big game player. So when you're feeling those nerves, just think, right, this is that moment. This is when I can either back into my shell and I'm not going to be that superstar, or this is when, no, I've got the toughness to come out and still put on, still do the work and put on a show, you know. So there's 2 ways you react. Make sure you react the second way, and it's normal to feel that way in the first place.
Yeah, you were a captain a lot of your career, and I've been in the same position. And I remember a young player just before we were going out for a huge game and said to him, "How you feeling?" He went, "Oh, I'm great." And I said, "You a bit nervous?" No. And I said, "Mate, you don't need to lie to me. Like, come on, how you feeling?" He went, "I'm absolutely bricking it." And but people feel like they have to lie, and it's not a natural thing. It's like you said, it almost shows that you really care about it. I'll never forget the time travelling to Murrayfield, 40-odd caps at this time for Scotland, and driving into Murrayfield on the coach and looking out, and there's a bloke sat on a pub bench with a pint. And I'm going to do probably one of the best things you can do for your country, go and play for your national team at Murrayfield in front of, 60-odd thousand. And I just remember looking out the bus window thinking, oh, I wish I was that bloke sat on that pub bench having a beer. I do not want to do this.
Well, I don't say this once, but I think it's good for probably the young athletes here to listen to this, because you will feel like this in your career. You'll think it's not worth it, and I don't want to put myself through this. I was on a plane going to play in Ireland, and there was the guy on the runway with the paddle boards like this, and I was looking out at the plane thinking, oh, I'd love his job. I'd love to do that. Just boss planes around out in the open, you know, and not have to play rugby. But you do it, it's totally worth it. But there are moments where you have wobbles because you think, oh God, is it worth it? But look, that's why most people don't do it, because they don't have the sort of, like I say, resilience a lot of times. They don't have the resilience to do it. But yeah, just recognize that it's when you go through these emotions in sport and as you ascend in your sport, it's absolute normal human behavior. People put a front on and they'll act brave. Don't look at them and get spooked. It's a textbook 100-meter final thing. All those 100-meter finalists in the Olympics are looking like they're arrogant and they're showboating. It's all a cover. It's all a cover just to try and spook the opposition. So everyone goes through it. Don't worry about it.
Highlight of your career?
Captain in the Lions. And it wasn't something I wanted to do. But even now I look back and I think, my God, all the people who play rugby, and I was picked as that one guy. Even now I pinch myself. I still think, how even my mates do it now, because they're not really into rugby, but they go, you play for the Lions. And even now at 35, I'm like, oh, I know, it's mental. I still can't believe it. You know, like you think of how many people across the country, and you've been that guy. So yeah, playing for the Lions, because when I was young, when I was 15, I had a Lions shirt for Christmas, because I told my dad I want to play for the Lions. I wore it everywhere. And after a few months, I remember putting it away. And my dad's like, where's that Lions shirt gone I got you? I said, Dad, I'm putting it away, because the next one I'm going to wear has got to be the real thing. I'm fed up of being this pretender. And that's when I swapped, when I was in school, I swapped my jam sandwiches for tins of tuna because it was better protein. And I didn't have packets of crisps. I had a banana and an apple instead. And I was training at lunchtime, so running around late at night, trying to get super fit. So when I got my first Lions jersey, that was probably the most satisfying moment I had, because I got my jersey, a real one, number 7. I stared at it and I couldn't believe I had it. And that's when I thought that was a lovely moment of realization. I was like, that 9 years of work was worth it, because I got there in the end, you know. So that was probably the nicest moment I had, was finally getting my number 7 Lions shirt and thinking, yeah, all those years, and it was totally worth it. No one can take that away from me now. So it feels like a long time and a big commitment when you're young, but I promise you, if that's your goal, then it's 100% worth it.
Whilst we've got you here and everyone's in here and we're on the lines, we might as well ask you thoughts on Andy Farrell. Is he the right man for 2025 in Australia? I know what most of us think, but I'm guessing you're the same way.
Farrell's class. He was the defence coach for the 2 tours I was on, so he understands Lions tours. I'm a little bit of an anorak sometimes when I look into stats. I just notice this. I follow his career closely. I know that the Lions are playing Australia, but New Zealand have always, been typically the benchmark. South Africa at the minute, but Andy Farrell has beaten New Zealand as a coach 7 times, 7 separate occasions, in 4 different roles. So one was with the Lions as defence coach, one was as England defence coach. He did it a bunch of times as Ireland defence coach, and he did it as Ireland head coach. I'm like, there's a common denominator there. And he's been to Australia. He won a test series in Australia as a defence coach for Ireland. He's won one already as a defence coach for the Lions. You look at his coaching CV, and then obviously Grand Slam champions recently, now Ireland. He's the number 1 guy, and he just knows, and he's got the mentality I'm kind of talking about. I learned a lot off him. You see his mentality when you're in a room with him, you can't help but just sort of be inspired and want to play with him. So again, he's got there probably because he's got an unusual level of resilience and competitive nature compared to most other people, but 100% the right guy to lead the Lions.
Yeah, it clearly runs in the family with Owen Farrell as well. And 6 Nations just around the corner. The big one to start us off, Wales versus Scotland in Cardiff.
Are you down for that?
What are you thinking?
Are you down for that?
I'll be down for that. We won't talk about where we'll go the night after, because we got to undo all this work that we've just spoken about. But I will be down for it. I'll make sure I catch up with you. We'll get a gym session in.
Nice.
And get on the old SW7 app. Don't worry about that. But Wales, Scotland, what are you thinking, Wobbs?
Oh, I think Scotland's are in a better place, but then you've seen this happen a few times. Whenever Scotland have come to Cardiff and people have built them up, Wales just have a bee in their bonnet and they just throw the kitchen sink at them. So I think you've got the top tier of teams at the minute, which is France and Ireland. Then I think you've got England in that next bracket, and I think probably Scotland just marginally ahead of Wales. But I do think that if you're looking at that next bracket, you know, you've probably got the top bracket of those three. Scotland are in that bracket with Wales, probably a bit better than Wales. But given Wales got home advantage, Wales are always a very different team in Cardiff. There's just something about Cardiff, you know. So I give the result to basically whoever's playing at home when it comes to Wales and Scotland. So I think Wales have the edge purely because they're at home. But if it was completely neutral, I think Scotland are probably in a slightly better place. If Scotland played in Murrayfield, I expect Scotland to win.
Yeah, Principality. It's a tough old place to go. I was never that fortunate when I went down there. And after all that chat of us saying how much we actually hated playing it, how much do you actually miss it though? Like going to Principality, roof closed, the anthems, everything like that. Do you still, you know, get that buzz and miss it?
I absolutely love going to Principality, and if I could play a match day again, I'd love it. Would I want to go through what it takes to get to that point? Because we know it's not just like, oh, let's just play rugby and play for Scotland or Wales. I'd be like, oh no, I can't put myself through that again. But the memories I've got, like I can remember standing on the halfway line, looking up, and it's like a massive bowl of 3 tiers, all those faces looking in at you, and thinking, oh my god, this is it. I'm doing it. You know, like. No one can ever take that away from me. So yeah, the memories I cherish so much more now. And when I'm there, I sort of just think, oh, I'm so glad that I did this. Like I don't have regrets. I did see one question about regrets. I have absolute zero regrets, and that's why I guess I finished my career in a good place. And I don't have any. No, I never played for the limelight. I don't care if people aren't talking about me, if I'm not in the papers, if I'm not on TV, on the promos. I played rugby to try and win things and be the best possible player I could. And because I thought I did everything I could to try and get to that point, look, there's still more I wanted to do. But because I did everything I could and every decision I made was geared towards that, I sit here now very fulfilled and content. You know, I don't have any regrets. So cherish those memories for sure.
Well, listen, we've taken up enough of your time. Sam, that's been absolutely outstanding. Thank you very much, mate. And for anyone that's coming halfway through this, missed a bit of it, we will be putting this on the website so you can go and catch up on whatever you've missed. Sorry to all of those that we didn't get to answer your questions. But again, thank you very, very much to Sam Warburton, OBE. I look forward to seeing your beautiful face on the TV throughout the Six Nations.
Legend. Nice one, Roy. Good to catch up again, mate, and see you soon, no doubt.
All the best. Thanks very much.
Legend. Cheers, bud.